Hello and welcome to the Develop Podcast. This is Danielle Reynolds, Business Development here at Whitley Penn, and your go-to source for all things connecting, growing, and learning together. Today, I am excited to highlight a growing and very essential service in my mind, that is our Outsourced Accounting Services Group, or CAAS as we like to call it around here, which stands for Client Accounting and Advisory Services. Outsourcing your accounting services can offer numerous benefits for businesses of all sizes, so I'm looking forward to our topic today. If anything sounds interesting after y'all listen, let's definitely have a conversation. So joining me today is Tim Sims, Managing Director in our CAAS group with over 20 years of experience helping companies grow and excel in various financial aspects. Tim, welcome to the Develop Podcast, and so excited to have you join us.
Thank you for having me, Danielle.
All right, well, let's dive right in. I'd love you to tell us a little bit about your background. We won't hold it against you that you went to A&M, but let's hear your school, maybe why you chose accounting, and how your career has evolved to where you are now.
Well, I chose accounting originally because I understood numbers.
Perfect.
And numbers made sense to me, and then accounting had a definitive application in business. As a business major, looking at management and marketing as a older teenager or a young 20s dude, I had no idea what all of those applications were. But accounting made sense. Mm-hmm. And Mom said, get a degree that you could get a job. And so I followed Mom's advice.
Great advice.
Got an accounting degree. As typical, I started in accounting, working for a small public firm locally. I'm in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and it was a wonderful experience there. And then I jumped to industry and went on to be a controller for several types of companies, and was ultimately a controller for an investor that had many different types of businesses. So I was blessed to get to handle anything from minor league baseball to transportation refrigeration, and so everything in between. Those two was a way to get that sparked in the early aughts to go on out, set my shingle out, and be an outsourced accountant for folks, which led me, and I will get on long answer to your question, but thank you for that, Danielle. That led me in outsourced accounting to finding accounting technology, and once I found that I could do accounting, something I could definitively do for businesses, and then do it with technology, my mind exploded, and here I am.
Yeah, I think that's great. And all those different experiences, I think probably make a huge impact in your career now, getting to work with businesses of all types. So can you explain the topic of outsourced accounting services in its simplest form and why it's relevant?
Well, let's make that simple, Dan. Outsourced accounting is nothing more than hiring a third party to handle your business accounting function.
Easy.
Yeah,
simple. And why do you think that's so relevant in today's time?
Well, a lot of functions in accounting are repetitive, and at the end of the day, they're not necessarily something that any person off the street is going to have experience with. And knowing how to do not just enter information into a system, know how to enter information into a system relevantly to how that business functions and how the business owner needs to see information and how they need to get it. So at the end of the day, keeping good books for being able to manage your business and to be able to comply with the federal government and your state governments is super important. We have to do that as business owners. And so that's why outsourced accounting is so important in that, to provide that expertise to people that might not have access to it otherwise.
Yeah, I like that you mentioned, it could look different for different businesses depending on what you're doing. So obviously the different services varies by clients too, but what services are typically included when you think of outsourced accounting?
Well, I think originally people think of that as bookkeeping services, so recording transactions, reconciling bank and balance sheet accounts. That's how I look at it, and basically, so everything that it takes to go from a credit card payment for some transaction all the way through to how to put that into the general ledger and reconcile all that came with that, and give a business owner accurate financial statements. And so that there's a lot there, but typically it involves the recording and the verification of transactions and the official close of those books on a periodic basis.
Yeah, typically, and could go up from there, right?
It's a broad topic we could talk about all day, which we'll try not to do, right? But that said, yeah, there's a lot that comes with that, because when you start getting into the best way that we're going to provide a great service for you is if you have good tools and good practices in your business, which we're going to talk about probably here in a little bit.
Is that typically a gradual process? I know, like, when I'm meeting with prospects, I'm always like, it's not a one size fits all. You could start here at A, and as we get in, as we make things more efficient, it grows from there. Is that what you typically see as far as adding new services on?
Well, I can say this. With my experience in every year of business that I've ever have been doing this outsourced accounting, I know one thing. Business owners, the first thing they think about when they're starting their business and getting everything set up and going, it's not accounting. They want to sell something, they want to provide a service, they want to do something that gets them paid. The last thing they think about is their accounting. So at the end of the day, that what we can provide is what we end up getting into is just not a one size fits all, because you don't know how long they've been in business, and you're jumping in to help take over their accounting, and so business owners do not think of their accounting first; they think of their accounting last. And what ends up happening is that there's so many things that we need to level set for the business owner so that we can get them in a position to be able to have accurate information and accurate reporting. They've never had it before.
So with that, you mentioned business owners thinking of accounting last. When y'all are working with new clients, do they typically have an in-house accounting team, or do you see it it varies
always
by all sizes?
Oh, sorry to interrupt you there. Yes, ma'am, always. Not every outsourced accounting job that we take is us by ourselves. We often work with an accounting team. And in fact, those are some of the best engagements that we have, where there's an accounting team. They're doing a lot of the data input, or what I like to call operational accounting.
Right.
So take a company that, like, part of a law firm, well, one of their biggest operational accounting functions that they do is billing their clients. Well, we're never going to sit in and build their clients. We can't build their clients. We won't know how to build their clients. We don't know their clients. We don't know all the things that they know about that. And so they can handle that part. So that's very operational accounting in nature of a client billing their customer. It's all the other things behind that, all the services and the counting the money, counting the expenses, reconciling all those items. Those are more of the services that we're going to provide.
Yeah, love that. So most folks do have an accounting team, which is great. Yeah.
Yes, they do, and we can work with them well.
Yeah, and they do the services that we maybe typically don't want to include in that.
Often.
I love it. That's collaboration at its finest. So I want you to tell us some of the advantages of outsourcing accounting functions. So when I think of this, I think of, could be cost savings, access to expertise, maybe scalability. What do clients love most, or what is the biggest value to outsourcing?
Well, you just answered all of them.
Or took them all away from you?
You
others?
took all of those away from me. No. I mean, again, just to reiterate, I think that what you want to try to do is identify the repetitive tasks that are of a state where you can outsource them. There's a lot of unique things that if there are very unique things that happen in business, those are hard to outsource. But if you have those lots of repetitive type stuff that you can outsource, those are the things you want to be looking at. Does that answer?
Yeah. And when you're working with business owners, I mean, how quickly do they see that value, right? Those things I mentioned, the cost savings, the access to expertise, are they seeing those pretty quickly? Like, wow, I'm so glad we went this route, or how does that look?
In a typical engagement, when we get in, the first thing we do is assess. So when you get in and assess, and you assess their systems and you assess their processes, and you start bringing those things to the table, bringing those acts, those actual actions to the table of adding that, that's where they begin to see the value. It's like, oh wait, now we have somebody who knows what they're doing, and they know how to do it, and they know how to tell me what to do, so that we can do that together as a team.
Yeah.
And that's why working with a team or working with the client, as many people on their team that's working with us is great, because we're going to add the value and the expertise of the process and put a bow on it for them, so that yes, and so that at the every X period, it's like, okay, we put a bow on that period. We're now past that period. We're not. Okay, I think it's about right. We'll move on and keep going, and not worry about that, and then worry about it later with the tax guy. No, it adds that layer of process and consistency that they look for. So they find that value. Typically, if you're a business owner and if you're inconsistent or things are inconsistent, you bring consistency. Usually, that's the big thing. Where they're like, oh, I like this.
I love it. So they're seeing it early on. Yeah. That's more bang for your buck.
Should be right away.
Yeah.
The best clients are right away. So.
I love that. So, Tim, talk to us about some common challenges clients may face when outsourcing. Do you have any tips on how to best mitigate them?
I think the biggest challenge that we run into are just manual processes, things that, a lot of businesses, most businesses, there's several processes that they all do. Mm-hmm. Whatever it may be. They all have credit cards. They all pay bills. They all have bank accounts to reconcile and deposits to put in the bank. And so there's all these repetitive things that go on that lend themselves to being able to be outsourced. Mm-hmm. And so looking at those are the best things that we can identify right away in terms of, well, why don't we, why are we, the hard ones are when it's well, I'm scared of the internet, and or those type of things where I'm still want to do things with paper and pen and do it manual. You get into that, and that's a hard thing to outsource. Mm-hmm. That's a hard account. That's going to be a hard client to work for.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, it's the folks that are willing to look at their processes and look at the things that are doing and go, well, what's a better way to do that? Well, we could do this, that, or the other, and that would take away a whole bunch of, either manualness or hardness to doing whatever it is they're doing, mm-hmm. and we make it more technically sound and technologically advanced to the point where it's easy to outsource.
Yeah,
it's easy to be a client, and frankly, it's usually more efficient for the business once they do it.
It's like their aha moment. It sounds like tips on how to mitigate those may come through education, right? And just simply having a conversation of, you don't know what you don't know. So talking about that. So let's discuss choosing an outsourced accounting partner. What should businesses look for in a provider, or any key factors to consider when selecting an outsourced accounting partner?
I'm going to use this word over and again. I already have. Consistency. Mm-hmm. I think, and I thought about this question a little bit and a lot. And our greatest ability is availability.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, mm-hmm. and what you want to find is someone that's consistently available.
Yeah.
First, and that I say that I remember being a solo artist out there, and some of the times that it was hard to do was when I was juggling too much stuff. Mm-hmm. And when I came to Whitley Penn and we built a team, it was so nice to have a team of people that we could attack all of these things with, so none of us were ever overloaded. So what you want to make sure when you're hiring somebody, it's okay to hire. It doesn't necessarily matter how big or small the firm is. Just make sure that person isn't going to be overloaded and can focus on your business.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, they may have 10 or 12 clients or however many hundreds of clients they have, etc. But what you want to feel like is that you matter.
Yeah.
And so, and then obviously expertise. Have conversations with them about your business, about the things that they're doing, and how they're doing things, and weigh them against. Look at the marketplace. Mm-hmm. Look at what's going on in the world today, and go and say, well, look at the technology that's out there for both accounting and not business operations. Am I using those? Do you know anything about those? Can I have this process here? It's very difficult to do. Can you make it easier? Mm-hmm. Ask that person those questions to help get them understand what they know. You know what I mean? What have you done? What have you? So when you're looking, so really consistency, availability, expertise, and then the other is, it's going to sound weird, price. Okay, you're going to ask me next. Well, what do you mean, Tim? Should they be cheap or should they be expensive? Well, at the end of the day, cheap is cheap. If it's cheap, you're going to get cheap service. At the end of the day, you weigh that against what you would pay. What you want to weigh, typically what you would do in the process of hiring somebody is weigh it against what you'd have to pay someone full time if you hired them,
right?
Or even part time. How much would you have to pay them, a human being, for them to survive, etc. So that's really what you're up against when you don't want to pay as much as you can. Of course, no, you want to get good value, and that's what any good service provider will give you a price that will provide the value for the service that you're buying. Right, not just the cheapest.
Yeah, I like that. There's a saying: fast, cheap, or good. You can pick two, but you can't have all three. I like to use that. So, can you share with us, without naming any names, but any examples of businesses that have successfully outsourced their accounting, and walk us through kind of what that process looks like?
I have a lot of stories that I could tell. That's the part where I have to pick which one. But at the end of the day, years ago, I had a staffing company come to me, and they had a lot. So a staffing company has a lot of. They hire a lot of people, so they have a big payroll. Of course, they're hiring people, and they're putting to work, and they have to keep time, and then they have to translate that time into an invoice, and all of the different processes. There were lots of different processes. They even factored, so we had to factor the invoices and provide a package. Really, when I started in, it was a mess. It was a disaster, and all that it took was first to design their system so that the input values equated to what we needed for the information to provide for both the management team and the operational team and the finance team, so they could get financed, and then we just applied consistent process to it, and we became a super successful organization that was a client for years, and the owners ended up selling that business.
Great.
And made a boatload of money. But one of the things I know added value to their business was the quality of the financial information they were able to provide when they were courted for purchase. They could provide information, and that they were immensely more valuable than someone taking over a mess.
Yeah,
does that make sense?
That.
So that's a good complete story of what a mess, no processes, no consistency. Apply all those things that we've talked about: expertise, and consistency, right, and technology. Yeah. And then in the end, what do you have? You end up having a valuable resource or a valuable asset.
I love that. And what's a typical, through that process? So I would assume onboarding, which could, or maybe it's assessing, then onboarding, then implementing. Is that kind of how the process works? And from a timeline perspective, how long does that take before you're kind of up and running and getting things going?
That's a good question. I think and it kind of goes back to a question you asked earlier about what are you looking for when you're hiring somebody. I'm going to tie it all together, and there should be a period of assessment. There should be a period of design. When I say designing processes, right? First assessing, what do we have? What do you do? How do you do it? Where's the low-hanging fruit, right? You should allow someone the ability to look at the entire list of things that you're wanting them to do for your accounting function, and give them an opportunity to assess them, look at them, and speak to them. How are we going to do this, this, and this? Do we need to change something? Do we need to apply something? So that is typically, that goes on the first, obviously, 30 days of an engagement. But I believe, and I don't just believe this because it comes out of my head, but I believe it because I've experienced it, and that's a longer process. That's a process that figuring out phase of what we're doing might take up to 90 days. It might take 120. It might take 150 days, depending on where your business is in the transition cycles. Okay, so if you're a steady business, you're doing the same thing all the time, and all you need to do is have consistent processes. Well, okay, that's more than likely you're going to have a situation where that's a quick onboard, a 30-day onboard. You get all that out of the way in the beginning, and you're on to processes. But if you have a business there's a lot of changes, there's consistent things, new products, new services, new this, new that, a lot of different things going on. That every time you go through any sort of a transition season from doing one thing to another, that adds complexity.
Sure.
And so there has to be just be mindful of that in your business to go, okay, what are my consistent stuff that I do, and where am I complex? And be willing to look at yourself as a business owner in the eye and go, okay, where am I complex where I shouldn't be?
Yeah.
And then ask somebody else. Ask another business owner. Ask a good expert, like we're talking about an outsourced accountant. Ask somebody, how am I doing? And be willing to hear the answer. Well, you're doing great, but here you could do a little better.
Sure.
To be willing to be humble in certain areas.
Yeah, it's kind of like there's some, like a power in a pause too, as you're going through that. Like, let's not just rush through it. We might get to a point where we need to pause a second and kind of evaluate it. Maybe something came up that was out of scope, or let's address that before we get on to the next thing.
That is extremely wise, Danielle. And while we're sitting here recording this podcast, that's easy to say, but it's harder to accept.
100%.
But it's absolutely gold if everyone at some point in time will pause and say, what can I do? Why am I? What's messed up here? Why is this so hard?
Yeah. For a lot of things in life, but we won't get into those. That's another podcast. So, kind of talking about this process, I don't know if folks know, but like y'all's team is generally remote, correct? So can you kind of talk about that setup and how that works efficiently?
Sure. So we're basically 100% remote. I am certain we have a few clients that we still probably visit every now and then. A lot of that it becomes out of just habit.
Sure.
From the client standpoint, they are the relationship that you built. They kind of gotten used to you, but realistically, that's a dying engagement. Typically, what we see is 100% remote.
Yeah.
And in fact, that's what's been able to allow me to, in my career, I mean, I've serviced companies in Germany.
Yeah.
I was in good old Texas, and we were servicing a client in Munich, and so you're able to do that really easily these days when you apply technology and good process to what you're doing. There is a way to do everything electronically just about in business. There are rare, unless you're building something like a house or you need to be there physically. That's a different situation. But in terms of accounting and providing accounting service to that, even to a construction business, that can be done remotely.
Yeah, I love that. So I know you are very passionate about partnering with business owners and even mentoring them and teaching successful financial strategies. I've seen you firsthand in prospect meetings, and I know you have a lot of passion for this when working with business owners. But can you talk a little bit about the steps that you take to build and maintain that trust with your clients? Because it seems it's an intimate part of their business, right?
I think the one thing I hope my clients will say about me, about us as a team, and all the stuff that we do is one, that we're consistent, and one that we tell them the truth. That's not a sales pitch. That absolutely is the first thing that we have to do.
Yeah.
Is we need to show up on a consistent basis and tell them the truth about whatever is going on. We're accounting, Danielle, so it isn't like. What I like to say is there shouldn't be any accounting emergencies. So there should be it should not be hard for us to have good conversations with a client all the time. You know what I mean? But part of that sometimes is they're going through a tough season, or there's something tough that they're going through, and they need somebody to look them in the eye and tell them the truth about anything. And it's been amazing. I've truly been blessed to get to, at times when clients are in critical situations, just look them and when I say tell them the truth, it's not bad truth. It's just explain to them what's really going on and what they just really need to do. And it's usually not as big as they think. You know what I mean?
Just being honest.
Yeah.
Right? It's like kind of like a parent. Like you have the best intentions when you, I don't know, have to say stop doing that, but I don't know, you build that trust like you mentioned, and you're just having honest conversations to, at the end of the day, help their business.
Yeah.
And so much of their personal is tied into their business as well. So what current trends are you seeing, if any, in outsourced accounting right now?
It's funny. That's a great question. And back to what I said about my career in 2003, I went out on my own and found QuickBooks. It was the desktop software back then, and I thought, oh wow, I found gold, and then went to conferences and got training and all through the early aughts and into the teens, doing all this technology, and I thought, wow, the outsourced accounting world is just blowing up with all this technology, and it's just. It seemed like, oh wow, this is great, I'm going to strike while the iron's hot. Well, what's funny is I fast forward to 2024 and the same is true. Businesses are still in a state of digitally transforming their businesses, turning it from an analog business, what I like to call it, to a digital business in all of the areas. So in other words, what that does is that creates better opportunity for outsourced accounting. At the end of the day, the less on-premise tools that you have to where you have to have a body sitting in here to do that for you, the more you have the opportunity to outsource your accounting and get other experts in that you might not have access to.
Sure.
And so it's technology. It continues to be the leader, and now I say now, there seems to be a trend, and that's probably where we are as a firm, but is the transformation from an old, maybe decently technological proficient system to now we need a new one. Now we need an ERP system. Now we're growing. Now we have all these multiple entities, and we need bigger accounting system. We need more expertise.
Yeah.
So it's technology, and it's been that for 20 years of my career.
Yeah, we haven't even touched on that side of things. The ERP, that's our next episode to come. So is that kind of how you continue to see the future of outsourcing in the accounting industry evolving, continually driving that technology, or any other ways it may evolve over time?
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, I think there's obviously a less and less accountants out there. If you look at numbers of you look at the industry, I think that that's only that outsourced accounting allows for the efficiency that where there's going to be, if there's going to be less accountants, then we better be efficient in what we do. So at the end of the day, I think that will the lower number of accountants will lend itself to needing the resource of an outsourced accountant. Yeah. Does that make sense?
It does. So any business types or maybe industries in particular that, I don't know, maybe, I don't want to say see the value of outsourcing maybe more than another, or tend to move in that direction, and maybe you don't, maybe it's pretty agnostic for the work that you do, but was just kind of curious if there were certain industries that tend to want to go that route.
I mean, obviously, it's service businesses are just they're slam dunk.
Sure.
For that, I think a lot of businesses have to look at themselves and understand. I mentioned it earlier, but the difference between financial accounting and operational accounting. So I think that there could be operational accounting. There may be a need for those people inside a shop that's a manufacturer or some distributor. They need people in there doing what are quote unquote accounting type tasks that are really more operational in nature. But any business that needs a controller or needs an accounting manager or needs basically their accounting run, what we've talked about with entering transactions and making sure they're accurate, man, that can be any business. You can an outsourced accountant would work for any of those businesses. In fact, might be the smartest thing for a business because they don't have to pay a full-time person. Yeah. Right. And then like if you work with Whitley Penn, you have a controller. You have a part-time controller, not paying full-time for a full-time controller, which is a big difference in price. Same with access to a CFO. You have access to a CFO, part-time CFO. Well, a fractional CFO is far less expensive than a full-time CFO, and you still get the same value.
Yeah, and I always like to say, and you're not just you're not just the CFO of one business. You're like looping in now like the knowledge you're gaining from other businesses you're working with, whether it's in the same industry or not. And that kind of advisory component you can bring to the client from an outside perspective can be huge. And you tap into all the resources you have at a firm, whether it's Whitley Penn or wherever, but plenty of resources where maybe you don't know the answer, but odds are you've got someone in the office that does, that you can call on.
Danielle, that happens every week to me.
Yeah.
Where I have someone ask me a business case. I had a client call me up. Great. He remembered me from a meeting. Man, I remembered you. You were real smart about this topic, and he brought up a topic, and you know what? I might have been pretty smart on the topic, but there was somebody in the firm that was smarter than me on the topic.
Yeah.
And so I've made that introduction, and at the end of the day, that now that client has a resource for something that he really needed.
Yeah.
And so that happens every week.
I love that story. So talk to us briefly, how does your team typically work with other service lines? Maybe audit, tax, whether it's in our firm or outside of our firm, but how does that typically look?
That's a great question. Obviously, we won't be doing outsourced accounting for our internal audit clients. That said, we do with our tax, and that works. We work interchangeably with tax. At the end of the day, the tax preparers. I had one of our partners emailing me this morning asking for financial statements for a client that has a zillion entities, and there was one ancillary entity that he had no idea what was going on, and we had the books.
Yeah.
So we were able to provide him with information that, frankly, he was lost, and it didn't need to bother the client.
Sure. Yeah.
Right? That was a big deal. I mean, our client would have been, she'd have had to stop her day and figure out, blah, blah, blah. And it was like, we took care of it, and she doesn't even know about it. And so that's part of working with tax. And then, as when we're doing outsourced accounting for our clients get audited.
Right.
And so we have several that it's standard every year. We work through the audit with the audit team. In other words, we're the one providing a lot of the information, or we're giving them access to it. Again, a lot of these are set up technologically well, so at the end of the day, it's a lot of times just turning over the keys to access to what they need to get in and do that. But that works extremely well for the client too, because an auditor might ask you, a business owner, hey, give me X, Y, or Z, and a business owner might look at them like they have three eyes because they don't know what the heck they're asking.
Right.
We do. We know what we can do, so we can support a good outsourced accountant. Will be able to support you if you're a firm or if you're a business that has to undergo an audit.
For sure, it seems like a much better, maybe not seamless, but an easier process for all involved, can make the audit a lot smoother as well. Whenever those numbers, books, and things are operating correctly.
Yes, ma'am.
I love that. Well, Tim, thank you so much for your time and insights, and I look forward to watching this service line continue to grow and evolve. It's already taken off like a rocket, but reminder that we are always here to be a resource and support you, and I look forward to connecting, developing, and growing with you all. Cheers.